Scientists, so today we are going to dive into our introduction to ecosystems because this week and next week and the couple weeks after, you are going to do your own group research on an ecosystem of your choice. And so today we are just kind of reviewing what an ecosystem is. You will want a journal. I have my biology, my science journal with me. If you have that, that would be a great choice. If you don't have that, you can always grab a piece of paper or a different journal of your choice. But we are going to take some notes today. So you can either watch this video one time through and then go back and take notes, or you can do it as I do it. So you can pause, start. It's totally up to you. But whenever you are ready to open up your journal, we are going to title it at the top, Ecosystem. And then we will want a definition of what that is. So an ecosystem is a particular habitat created by the plants, animals, and non-living elements. So all the plants, all the animals, and all the non-living elements that when they come together in a particular place, they are forming a particular type of ecosystem. Eco means house. So they're creating a habitat or a place of living for these plants and animals. And today we are going to focus on the ocean ecosystem, and then you will get to dive into your own ecosystem of choice. So you'll definitely want a pencil. I have some colored pencils with me. If you don't have colored pencils, pencils work fine too. Crayons work well. Markers also work. So the first thing in my ecosystem that I am going to draw are all my abiotic elements. And abiotic means non-living. So I'm going to draw some land. And this is just a quick sketch. It does not have to be a masterpiece. This is just to kind of refresh our memories of what ecosystems are. And so we always have this to come back to if we need it. So we have our land. This is always going to be an important part of any ecosystem, right? The land is going to look different though, depending on where in the world we are. The land might be harder, it might be harder rocks, it might be volcanic rock, it might be a softer soil or a clay soil. So it all depends on where geographically we are. We also are going to have some sort of water. And so for our ocean, I'm going to make quite a bit of it. And I'm not going to color this in because that would take me quite a while. You can if you want to though. So we also have our water, and then finally we have the sun. And these are the three abiotic elements that we are always going to have no matter what. If you think back to our second great story, these plus the air were our four main elements that were here on Earth before life came. So these will always be present in any ecosystem. Even if it's a desert, there will be some water. Okay, so these are all of our, and we have our air, but I'm not going to draw that. So these are all of our abiotic elements in any ecosystem that we will find. So I'm going to write that definition up here at the top. Abiotic. Abiotic is non-living. Bio means life. And if we put an A in front of that, oops, sorry, that got wiggly. If we put an A in front of that, it means non. Okay. So now we also need our biotic elements, and these are living. So I'm going to make that note over here as well. And so now we need our living elements, which will be different plants and animals. So in our ocean ecosystem, I'm going to use green to represent plant life. We have these tiny, tiny little plant life living, and they're often right up near the surface of the water. And these little tiny living plants are called phytoplankton. And they are up near the surface of the water partially because it's easier to grab the energy of the sun. And we call these phytoplankton, we call them producers because they are able to produce the food on their own that they need, right? They take the energy from the sun, and then they also take nutrients from the water to create their own food. They don't need to eat another thing in order to continue living. So in every ecosystem, we will always have a producer of some sort. And those are always going to be our plant life. They are able to produce their own food. Now, in the ocean ecosystem, we also have tiny little animals, and I'm going to use red to represent them. We have these tiny little animals that we call zooplankton. Zoo meaning animal life. And these zooplankton, they are not producers. They are what we call consumers. They have to consume or eat something else in order to keep living. And so they are fed by our phytoplankton. Now, we also have, while we call these consumers, we also have secondary and tertiary consumers, which means that there is going to be something else. You can use any color you want. In the case of the ocean, we have small fish. So I'm just gonna draw a small little fish. Again, it does not have to be a work of art. And these small fish they are not producers, they are consumers. They are going to consume the zooplankton. And then we know that we also always have some bigger fish. They are going to consume our smaller fish. And in the process of consuming these smaller fish, these bigger fish are also in a way consuming our zooplankton and our phytoplankton, because we start to see that we have a chain reaction kind of happening, right? So our smaller fish is going to feed our bigger fish. We would call this fish a secondary consumer because he's the second consumer in our chain. Or this is our secondary consumer. This is our tertiary consumer. He's our third consumer in the chain. And then you might even have a bigger fish, such as maybe like a shark of some sort. And he is going to consume this purple fish that we have here. But again, in a way, they're kind of consuming the smaller and the zoo and the phyto because of the chain that is happening. Now, at some point, this large fish, it's going to die, right? All of these are, but I'm just gonna say that this large fish is going to die. And when it does, it will, of course, sink to the bottom. And what's going to happen is that we actually have some other small microorganisms down at the bottom. And their job, these are not zooplankton. Probably should have done them in black. Let's do that so that we don't confuse them with zooplankton. They're also very small. These are organisms and animal life that are going to help decompose the body of this dead fish. So I'm going to draw more of a skeleton. And he's dead. Okay, and so this dead fish is going to, all of the flesh from this fish is going to feed these organisms. And these organisms, as they feed on this dead fish, they are going to release some of the nutrients into the water, and the nutrients in that water are going to be absorbed by our phytoplankton. And the phytoplankton are going to use the nutrients from the water that these decomposers kind of let off into the water. They're going to use the energy from the sunlight, the heat from the sunlight, right, to create their own food, just like we saw in the food factory. And then they are going to feed our zooplankton. Our zooplankton are then going to feed a small fish, which is then going to feed a bigger fish, which is then going to feed a bigger fish. That big fish is eventually going to die. And when it does, there are all of these little organisms who are going to feed on the flesh of this big fish, and they are going to release nutrients into the water, which will then be absorbed again by our phytoplankton. And this chain, this cycle continues and continues and continues. And this is what creates an ecosystem where the land and the water and the sunlight are all coming together to support in some way the living organisms, the plants and the animals that live there, to create a certain type of habitat. And they all function together to make sure that this habitat stays balanced and in order.